I mean, at heart, what Abahlali has as its at its core is a series of philosophies around everyone should be able to govern. Everyone should be able to create the political conditions in which they live their lives. Now,
for example,
for example, I mean, to be able to be treated as equals around the table when deciding how to install water, for example, as for demanding electrification because everyone deserves, everyone needs energy. Talking about access to jobs in equal ways. So what they do is set up these committees that investigate and that push politicians, that sometimes take to the streets and demand things from politicians. It's oppositional, but it's also cooperative, and they come up with a range of politics to control resources and the world around them. And this relates to food sovereignty in some very important ways. Food sovereignty is the idea that everyone has the right to control how we eat. Right. I mean, at the moment, the people who control the way we eat are corporations.
Right.
We were talking before we came on air about how some of basically the world's food system is in the hands of just a few corporations.
Right, Monsanto,
Cargill, right, exactly,
Cargill,
and Unilever, for example. They own 98% of the world's packaged tea market.
Right.
So really, a lot of the way the world works is controlled by corporations.
Right.
And what food sovereignty is a way of saying, actually, you know what, that's not okay. Corporations don't need to eat, they don't need to sleep, they don't love, they don't need housing. It's human beings who need all these things. And human beings need to be able to control resources so that we can actually, all of us, take over the world. All of us can control the world around us. And that idea in food sovereignty means controlling seeds, controlling the way food is distributed, controlling the way the market works so that sustainable agricultural production is supported. It's all about, at heart, democracy. It's about freedom. It's about taking control of the world around you. And so there's a very direct link in terms of the politics.
Right.
A direct link between Abahlalism, between finding out about the city in which you live and coming to control it, and Via Campesina's idea of food sovereignty.
And talk about Via Campesina.
Of course. Via Campesina is really the world's largest social movement.
And it's out of Brazil?
Via Campesina is everywhere.
Oh.
The Association of Black Farmers in the United States is a member of Via Campesina. The National Family Farm Coalition in the United States, also Via Campesina. And the MST in Brazil, also a member of Via Campesina.
And translate MST?
MST is it's a Brazilian Portuguese word that means the Landless Rural Workers Movement. And they're discovering wonderful ways of having control over the world around them.
Right. And now, when I was reading in your book, Stuffed and Starved, about MST in Brazil, that's what made me think Brazil. I didn't realize it was part of Via Campesina was part of an international movement.
That's right. So the MST is part of this big umbrella.
Huge umbrella. I got it.
150 million people at least.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. And MST, though, organized their own cooperative farm, and that became very self-sustaining and not just food. Talk about that and how perhaps that could be translated into action here.
I think that's a great point. I mean, the MST in Brazil has resettled over 1 million people. It's not just one farm, it's farms all over the country. And what they've done, actually, is take on maybe the central institution in modern capitalism, private property. In order to have these cooperative farms and to be able to farm sustainably and to build their own schools and hospitals and social systems, they needed land on which to do that and water with which to do it. And what they've done is, in the Brazilian countryside, there are huge mega farms with unused land on them, and they've spotted these areas of land, and they've occupied them. They've taken over private property, and they've done that and built community on it. And I think that's a source of inspiration here, because I think right now we live in fear of private property. We let private property govern the way that we carry out our lives. And there are some ways in which I mean, private property was always a negotiation. If you look back in history, private property was, in some ways, just taken from the poor, and in some ways it was justified on the grounds that, look, if we enclose this property, it will become more productive. But if people privatize land and do nothing with it, if people privatize land just to speculate, then they lose that right. They lose the right to private property, because property is, we share this world equally.
And land should be
available for everyone.
Yes, absolutely. I have to take a moment and invite our viewers to call in if they like and ask any questions of Raj Patel at 415-621-4473, 621-4473. Talk a little bit about the Green Revolution that started back in the 60s and what that was about. It sounds positive, but it isn't really.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, the word Green Revolution was coined by an arch anti-communist. And the Green Revolution was manufactured so that there wouldn't be any other revolutions. That sounds a strange thing to say, but basically, the Green Revolution was this sort of package of seeds and of fertilizer and of irrigation that was meant to bring a lot of food to the hungry third world. That's great. Who can argue with that? Except that the reason it was implemented was because lots of parts of the hungry third world were socialist and were very active and very militant and wanted land reform, land redistribution. Parts of, where the Green Revolution was applied most forcefully were places like India, where there was a thriving Maoist movement among peasants demanding land be redistributed. But what the Green Revolution did was say, you know what, we don't need to redistribute land. We can keep large land holdings and a few, handful of large landowners who will use these new technologies to increase the amount of food production. And that food will go to feed the poor, and the poor will be less angry, and therefore they will be less revolutionary, and therefore, we will have a green revolution instead of a red one. So that was the logic behind the first Green Revolution. And you could say, all right, well, look, we don't care. I mean, even if it had all this bad politics behind it, if the poor got fed, what's wrong with that? The trouble is that the Green Revolution is often thought of as a success. Hunger went down in the years after the Green Revolution. But really, if you look at the figures, the major reduction in hunger didn't come from India. It didn't come from anywhere where the Green Revolution was being practiced. It came from China. If you take China out of the picture, the Green Revolution saw an increase in the levels of hunger. And it saw increases in levels of hunger.
And why did China?
Well, I mean, China was engaged in went for a massive